Hey guys and gals, it's Logan Freeman with the Live Free Investors Podcast. I interview investors and business owners who share investment advice so you too can live free. Today, I'm talking with Russell Gray. Russ, in a few sentences, tell us who you are if people don't know and what you do.
Well, I guess my biggest claim to fame is I'm the co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio show. Kind of got there through a convoluted background in financial services, marketing, corporate sales, and I started a mortgage company, rode a nice wave up until 2008, and then that thing imploded. And we really got serious about building the Real Estate Guys radio show brand and
Yep.
network after that. And that's what I've been focused on ever since.
I've had the pleasure of coming to one of your guys' events, met you in person a few times now. We got to enjoy Hunter Thompson's event earlier this year together, where you really stole the show on the stage, I have to say. And I really enjoy the emails that you and Robert write, because I think about the macroeconomic trends that define our micro decisions on a regular basis, and you help really kind of push through the noise a little bit. So I really appreciate all of the work that you guys have done. I recommend you and Robert and the podcast more, and I listen to every single podcast. So thank you for the work that you're putting out there still to this day.
Well, it's our pleasure.
Not only on the real estate side, but from setting goals and looking at precious metals. I mean, oil and gas. So you have best in class relationships that you guys bring on. So I really appreciate that. I wanted to ask you a question today around not just real estate, but as you think about your career, this is a pretty broad question, but what's the best thing about being an investor and a business owner to you?
I think the freedom to create a prison of your own liking, right? We all have to submit ourselves to systems and processes and disciplines and procedures to get anything done. And you're either going to submit to somebody else's or you get to create your own.
Yes.
And so, being an independent person all my life, I love being able to reinvent myself whenever I feel like it, whenever my personal life calls for it, whenever external circumstances call for it. I don't have to wait and ask permission. I can immediately take control of my destiny and reinvent myself whenever I need to.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that sentiment has rang true, I think, from a lot of the guests that have been entrepreneurs and business owners and, investors for quite some time. And it's something that I'm starting to realize, being in this business now for only 3 years. But my wife always mentions to me, she's like, there's no way you ever can go back to working at a company again. And I said, no, why would I? I mean, there's a lot of gain to be had, but also there's a lot of responsibility. So just as a father, and, I'm curious to know, I have two small kids now, but like, how are you able to balance what I'll call I've named this, transactional anxiety, but just from, the ups and downs, the responsibilities that it takes to owning your own business, and not bringing that home per se. I'm just curious to get your perspective on that. I've asked that question to a few guys, but I really wanted to hear I didn't prep you for that, but I really want to kind of hear your idea, because you've been in this business for a long time.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't need much prep. I think that when you are trying to get things figured out, and when you're a young father, I mean, in my case, I always worked out of the house. So my wife and I homeschooled, and to support her, I organized my business life around working out of the house, and I love it. The one thing I hate doing is going to an office.
Sure.
And so that separation you talk about had to be an internal discipline. It
Mhm.
had to be me where I focused. And so I do it through time blocking,
Yeah.
and I just make sure that when I'm in a certain mode, that I stay in that mode. And, with the kids in the house, I had to create separation. So I had an isolated area that was my office. It was upstairs. And they knew that when the day started, they weren't allowed to come upstairs.
Sure.
I used to tell them to this day, and my children are all grown today, but if you ask them what were the rules to go up the stairs to see dad, the bone had to be sticking out of the flesh or the house had to be on fire.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I don't want to know about it until I come down to check in. And I always made sure I did. And when I did, I left everything upstairs and I just came downstairs and focused on them. And I was 100% there. In fact, my youngest daughter told me in her 20s, she finally told me, she goes, when we were growing up, I didn't even know you worked. I just thought you hung out. I mean, I didn't have any idea because I was there all the time.
Yep.
And whenever I was with her, I was with her. I was playing. She never had any idea that I even had any responsibility. So you can do it. It's just a mental thing.
Yeah.
and a structural thing.
Well, that's an inspiration for me because one thing I've been, not struggling with, but I've been coping with is, how, and now it's a little harder with those little mini computers that we have in our pockets all of the time, but turning it off and being where your feet are, and so that's an inspiration that you've been able to do that, and an inspiration that your daughter didn't even know that you were you worked, you just kind of were hanging out, so to speak. So I like that a lot. Okay, so this has been an interesting year. You guys have been tracking this. You've been ahead of a lot of kind of the trends. So I'm really curious to know, keeping up to date on the current opportunities and trends can be a real challenge. So tell me how you take in information and then aggregate that or make decisions in your opinions based on that, and how you cut through the noise and get to the facts, because you guys are some of the best at doing this. And so I'm really curious to know how you're intaking information and then making decisions based off of that.
Well, anybody that's ever set up a budget understands the concept of creating a chart of accounts.
Hmm.
And so that tells you when income and expenses occur, transactions occur, what buckets they go in.
Hmm.
Well, if you want to understand what's going on in the world, you have to kind of set up the chart of accounts. You have to understand the basic structure. In fact, I'm going to be working because we've just relaunched our YouTube channel, and
Okay.
one of the jobs I have is to come up with these key concept videos, these little 5-minute videos that explain concepts like arbitrage or the
Sure.
inverse relationship between bond yields and bond prices. When you understand the basic mechanics of the financial system, then you can read the news every day and you know where to put the information. You have context. And once you have that, it actually becomes pretty easy. And then the other way to do it, of course, is you are always talking to people who are smart. As soon as this COVID-19 crisis hit, the first thing we did was call up all our friends that
Yep.
we had these great relationships with and say, "Hey, we want to talk about this, and to make it worth your while, we're going to turn the microphones on, and we're going to create a series." Peter Schiff's videos got nearly 600,000 views on our YouTube channel. It's just
Yeah.
amazing, right? But we use the show and our positioning there to get perspectives, and we listen to people who are outside of our space. It was a big mistake we made in 2008. We were in an echo chamber of the real estate community. We
Hmm.
didn't have any insight at all into what was going on outside that world. So you have to have context. Number one, you have to stay on top of current events. Number two, and then number three, you have to ask other people who are doing the same thing from different perspectives what they think and what they see, and then you get a broader picture.
Yeah, I think that's a great breakdown. I've stole some really great one-liners from you and from Robert. The riches are in the niches. I love that because I've used that multiple times. And the riches are in the niches is really important. People keep asking me, why don't you go outside of Kansas City? I don't know anything else about anywhere else. And so you're always saying that real estate is hyper local. And so I am an expert on our market, and that's what we're dominating right now. And I also love the notion of moving money off of Wall Street and into Main Street. And so I've listened to you multiple times. I also want to ask you about, you mentioned the financial system. Can you delineate between the financial system and the economy? And the analogy I think you used up at when you spoke at Hunter Thompson's was about the car. I would love
Yeah.
to kind of dive into that so people can understand what that difference might be.
Yeah, well, again, you have to just compare things that you don't understand and find the similarities to the things that you do understand. And most of us understand, when we get in a vehicle to go someplace, we have a starting point and we have a destination, and we measure our progress by our gauges. When the gauges that you look at a lot of times are, the odometer and the speedometer. Right. So
Yep.
the challenge is when you're looking at the economic gauges, do you know what you're looking at? There's a lot of attention put on the stock market. Stock market are easily manipulated gauges.
Hmm.
And it's no doubt they're manipulated. I mean, it's overt. We know we have the plunge protection team that was formed after the 1987 crash. We know now that the Fed is actively going in through proxies and propping up key stocks.
Right.
And through comparative sampling, they're able to buy a few shares of few key stocks, move the needle on those indexes so everybody can point at them. But it's become so glaringly egregious that people are like, well, okay, this doesn't make any sense. How can we have 40 million people unemployed
Right.
and all these companies going bankrupt and the stock market is booming? That makes no, you don't have to be a PhD in economist to figure that out. That makes no
Right.
sense. So anyway, but if you're going down the road and you are looking at these gauges that are talking about economic activity, you don't necessarily understand that the system, the machinery that you're in might be faulty. So going back to the car, if I'm going down on the road to riches and I'm going 75 miles an hour, okay, I'm moving along at a good pace. My odometer says the miles are clicking by. I don't have that far to go. I think I'm on my way. What I don't recognize is that I'm not looking at my engine oil. I'm not looking at my temperature gauge, and the very machinery that I'm counting on to finish the job and get me to my destination is going to break down. And it doesn't break down a little at a time, it breaks down suddenly.
Right.
That's what happened in 2008. The financial system was very fragile. It was fragile in 1997 with the long-term capital management meltdown. It's so, but most of us don't understand that frailty.
Sure.
Well, today we do. And so the Fed's reaction to what happened is obvious. They understand that the financial system's in trouble. Why is the financial system in trouble? Because payments have stopped. When payments stop,
Right.
debt goes bad. When debt goes bad, everything breaks. And so when you understand those mechanics, it's easy to see coming. Now, what do you do about it? That's harder to figure out, right?
Right.
Because it affects everything. But that's really it. The economy is the activity of people exchanging money, doing business together. The financial system are the credit markets, the banking system, and the currency that supports all of that.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. I appreciate the analogy. Russ, what's the best advice that you have received as an investor over your years? And I know that's a pretty large question, and and I asked you this question via email, how you find all of those great quotes. I know you're an avid reader. So, you don't have to have one, but maybe one or two pieces of advice that you've received that you would like the listeners to kind of hear. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the best piece of business advice I ever read came from Jim Collins' book Good to Great,
Mhm.
and it's where he talks about confronting the brutal facts.
Yeah.
Because the biggest mistakes I've made in my life is where something was happening that was so bad, that was so hard to comprehend, so hard to accept. I just went into denial.
Yep.
And so that's how I handled the first few months of 2008. And it just made a bad problem a whole lot worse.
Sure.
So that was a great piece of advice. I had a chance to interview Donald Trump before he was president, before he was even nominated,
Yep.
or even before he'd announced. And he gave a great piece of advice when I asked him what he learned in the down times. And he goes, it's always good to have a little bit of cash. And I had a business mentor who told me that cash is like oxygen, and a small business person's obsession needs to be managing cash flow. You can live for a while without profit. You can even live for a while without revenue,
Yep.
but you can't live very long without cash. And if you think your liquidity is in the form of credit lines, and when financial systems break, credit lines through no fault of your own get shut down, all of a sudden you're completely illiquid. Happened to me in 2008. So I'd say that was probably the best advice. Always have some cash on hand, and then confront the brutal facts quickly with optimism and a good team, and then do what you need to do and don't hide from it.
Yeah. And, some new authors have taken those same threads, I think, and created their own kind of rhetoric around them. It reminds me of Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership. What Jim Collins was talking about. When I read Good to Great, I realized that everybody's IQ at a certain level can kind of be the same. What really creates awesome leaders and business owners are folks that focus on the intangibles and the emotional quotient, or the EQ. And so I was on this quest, when I read that book 6 or 7 years ago, I think now, to really focus on emotional intelligence. And as I have been pairing up or partnering with folks, one thing I always look at is, how emotionally intelligent is this person? And when the stakes get high, are they getting very, very, what I'll call emotional, or are they able to kind of stay pretty steady? And I try to find folks that are staying pretty steady, because when you start to get emotional, especially in large transactions, it can cause a lot of issues. So I love that book, and I appreciate that. Russ, this is an opportunity for you to promote somebody to the show. I have folks on here that I really trust, and I always ask this question. What one person can you think of? And I know you know a lot of folks, but what one person that you think of, he doesn't have to be real estate, but an investor or business owner should be on the show to share some of their insights.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think, there's so many people that are, like the obvious people. Um, you know, I don't know. I mean, if I there's just so many. I mean, I think it depends on what you're really trying to figure out. If you're trying to understand, kind of personal development and what's going on between your ears and how to lean into things and how to think. There's nobody better than Robert Kiyosaki. I mean,
Yep.
he deals with all that stuff so well. If you want somebody that's going to help you kind of understand what's going on in the macro, I'm a huge fan of Peter Schiff. We spent a
Hmm.
lot of time with Peter. Peter's been our most popular YouTube guest by far, not even a close second.
Yep.
And Peter just has a way of just being bold and courageous and speaking his mind no matter what. So if you can land him, he's great.
Awesome. Those are
Um,
two great people. I would
yeah,
love to have both of them on. I will continue to, build the audience so I can add some value to those folks, but would love to get those folks on the show. I appreciate that. Russ, I talked to you about this right before we got on. We're wrapping up, but I want to make sure that this goes out this week so we can promote a show that had or an event that had a profound impact on my business life, and really kind of, before I came to your guys' Secret of Successful Syndication event, I did not know what that word meant. And I have we're moving, but I have my binder usually right here. And so it's packed up in the box and it's going to the new office. But tell everybody a little bit about the secrets of successful syndication. I know there's there's an event coming up here. So where can they find that? Where can I point folks to so they can go check that out? And then we'll talk a little bit about the impact that it's had on me too.
Yeah, well, the best way to get information is just send an email to syndication@realestateguysradio.com and we'll get you information on it
Got
right
it.
away. And you need to move fairly quickly. But we started doing this back in 2011 because after 2008, we recognized, especially me coming out of the mortgage business, that the distribution of capital from savers to Main Street was broken. And it was going to be broken for a little while. So we saw a huge opportunity in private capital, Main Street, investing in Main Street. And candidly, I was pissed. I just said, I looked at what happened to me and many people because of the shenanigans in Wall Street. And I
Hmm.
thought, why should Main Street invest their money in Wall Street and then have Wall Street, lend it back to them or after they've done skimming? So why can't Main Street invest in Main Street? And that's all
Yep.
done through syndication. So syndication is really just an individual sponsor or organizer or syndicator going out and finding deals and raising money from private investors that want a piece of the action, and you collect some fees and you collect some profit sharing for doing it. And it's the shortest path really to building wealth. If you want to, if you think about the two great wealth builders, one is starting your own business
Yep.
and the other one is real estate investing. You combine both of those into one activity, and now you spend your day working not for somebody else and trying to earn money and save and then invest in your spare time, but you make your career going out and finding deals and investing at a bigger scale. And once you're good at it, the sky's the limit
Yep.
because there's so much money out there and people will actually come at you and they want to put their money to work. And as soon as you prove yourself, and there's whole system for developing, when you're a nobody to becoming a somebody, we've helped a lot of people do that, but that's really what it's all about. So if the idea of entrepreneurship and investing is on your list and you want to know how to put the two together, come to the event, find out what it's all about. We have lots of people, just like you, that have taken the class and gone out and taken what they learned. It's enough, right? There's more stuff if you
Sure.
want more stuff, but if you don't need more stuff, you get enough in the 2 days to be able to go out and take action and go build a business.
Yeah. What I loved about the event was just that there is so many different things that you can go down a rabbit hole on. But what you guys do is you give a high level overview of the concepts, and then you bring in incredible people that are subject matter experts to talk about those pieces. And then you also have, I've been on Victor's show, and I really love Victor Menashe's, podcast and everything. But you bring on people like Victor Menashe to really talk about these different aspects and help to break it down and say, look, if you in this binder, which is an awesome binder, and I know you guys are mailing them out now, so I mean, but in this binder you can build your business if you focus on these things. And so all of the information, there's so many podcasts, so many books, there's so many different things, you put it into one actionable step and or one process. And I really enjoyed that. And so I really appreciate all the work that you guys do. Russ, any last, parting words that you would like to you would like to impart on the listeners today?
Well, a couple of things. I'll just say, we're obviously in very uncharted territory. The water is probably going to get very choppy. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. I encourage people to lean into it. That's kind
Yeah.
of what confronting the brutal facts is. And understand the flip side of every problem is an opportunity. And this is an opportunity for you. Maybe if you've lost your gig or you're not certain about your future, or maybe you've been investing a certain way and you're realizing some of those things were a little bit on the edge, and they were speculative, and you want to get back to the things that are real and essential. This is a great time. This
Yeah.
is a great time for you to reinvent yourself, to question some of the things that you thought and believed before, to form new relationships, new alliances. And if you do have some spare time, because you've been sheltered in place or temporarily unemployed or whatever it is, take advantage of the opportunity. And I say probably the best little piece of advice I'll give is a very simple phrase that I think has served me well, and that is think and do is better than wait and see.
Yeah.
Think and do is better than wait and see.
Absolutely. Well, Russ, thank you so much. Guys, this is Logan Freeman with the Live Free Investors Podcast, where investors and business owners share investment advice so you too can live free. For more insights and ideas on how you can live free on a regular basis, follow me on LinkedIn. Go check out Russ at the Real Estate Guys Podcast. His website. Send an email to syndication@therealestateguys.com.
At realestateguysradio.com.
At
Realestateguysradio.com.
realestateguysradio.com. We'll have that in the post so you can take a look at that. Russell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, guys, live free.